I'm the music, don't feel like a day. I'm the music, don't feel like a day. I'm the music, don't feel like a day. When I felt it with you.
Hello, and welcome to your Online Strength Coach podcast, episode 25, Mo Pain, Mo Gain. Hello, and welcome to the 25th episode of your daily Online Strength Coach podcast, Mother, Sisters, Dog version. I think I'm going to have to rename this podcast because that's a bit of a ridiculous mouthful. As I'm sure most of you will appreciate, I haven't recorded anything in about 2 weeks. Well, Sunday before we went away on camp. I didn't manage to record anything on camp because it was just absolutely ridiculously totally hectic. A little bit of hyperbole there. But I was pretty much doing shit right up till about 9-10 o'clock at night every night, so didn't really get an opportunity to record anything at camp. Went straight to the UKSA conference, which gives me a night. It was actually, I need to do a write-up on that for the website, so that's an article that will come in your way reasonably soon. So that's another bit of content that I need to get on with. But yeah, from the camp straight into the UKSA conference, I never really got a chance to have any time to myself. I was pretty much full on, either talking to socializing or working. So it was I like to keep myself to myself quite a lot. So it was quite a lot of personal contact for me. So I just really, last week was kind of a bit of a nothing week for me. I went to work and whatnot, but I never really got a chance to sit down and just get at the podcast. There were opportunities, like on Wednesday I could have definitely done some content, but I just never really had the energy or never really got round it. I had friends round, Owen, if you're listening to this, which I really doubt you're not, and Nesboot. We went out on Tuesday night and things got a little bit loose, so Wednesday was a bit of a write-off. And then the weekend just never really got around it again. Could have recorded on Sunday but didn't. Decided to sleep, to nap and do programs rather instead, which I think was, to be honest, probably a better use of time. So anyway, not to worry, we're back. Today's question comes from Mark via Facebook. I have a question you should answer for your videos. I know the answer myself already, obviously, but it's bullshit that's going around every fucking gym I see, and it's all taken the wrong way. Why more pain doesn't mean more gain? More pain. What is the correlation between pain, soreness, and strength gains, improving fitness? Why the old saying is not completely true, and people need to start to train smarter rather than just trying until they are sore and can't move. This one is not dissimilar from the one Michael asked a few episodes ago, but mind you, that's a while ago now. Where to begin? Well, where to begin is I watched the Pain and Gain film with The Rock and Mark Wahlberg yesterday for the first time. I know it's a bit old, but it was a really good film. You should probably check that one out. Yeah, so like delayed onset muscle soreness or muscle soreness in general is not really indicative of strength gain. Well, it's not indicative of strength gain at all, really. It's not indicative of muscle gain or the process of hypertrophy is happening. Obviously, there has to be some aspect of muscle soreness if you're training for hypertrophy, because the primary adaptation behind that is muscle damage and the cascade of hormones and inflammation and everything that goes along with that process. We'll not get into that. But yeah, there needs to be some form of muscle soreness if the primary adaptation that you're after is hypertrophy. So if you're training for size, not that you necessarily require muscle soreness, but there should be some muscle soreness. Basically, you shouldn't be so sore that you can't move. There's no need to like squat yourself so you can't move the next day. That's just retarded. You'd probably be better off doing 2 leg sessions in a week and getting like a good stimulus rather than trying to overreach the entire time, which is kind of what we get towards, and what I'm going to infer that Mark's talking about here is people that are constantly overreaching, constantly trying to push too hard. There's definitely a place for overreaching in your program, but overreaching is not to be practiced week in, week out, because it leads to only one place. Well, it leads to 2 places: stagnation first, then after stagnation it leads to injury. And it might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but eventually if you train like that, you're definitely going to get injured at some stage. So we're talking about strength gain primarily because this is what this podcast is all about, really. The first time you do an exercise, after a while, muscle soreness it should be sought. It's going to happen anyway. If you haven't back squatted in 3 months and you go back to back squat, if you do just the bar, you're going to be painful for 3-4 days afterwards. It's just the way it is, the way of the world. But once you get into an actual training cycle and you train for a while, muscle soreness really shouldn't be part of your day-to-day life. Probably really shouldn't experience any muscle soreness really unless you're doing some kind of overreach, or obviously there needs to be overloading in the program. But the primary, certainly within weight classes anyway, the primary adaptation towards strength gain is the skill acquisition, which is all to do with coordination, intra and intermuscular coordination. The rate coding, all the things that make make the correct muscles fire at the correct time during the different points of the movement. That you adopt the correct body postures, you take the bar through the correct reference points during the movement. That you're basically moving through the correct pattern for that lift, or the optimal pattern for your body for that lift. All of these things far outweigh the kind of muscular development, as it were, the hypertrophy development as far as strength gain goes. It is possible to gain quite a lot of strength without gaining a shitload of mass. Now, a lot of the research will tell you that one of the primary adaptations of strength gain is cross-sectional area, which is of course true. However, there's a line to be towed there. I think if you look at some of the incidental research on this topic, you'll see that they'll say beginner lifters' primary adaptation is neural, and advanced lifters, the primary adaptation is cross-sectional area. There is some debate on that, and I would call that in the question. I don't think the primary adaptation for an advanced lifter is cross-sectional area. I've had the same muscle mass for the last, well, not exactly the same muscle mass, but around about the same amount of muscle mass for the last 2-3 years, and I am lifting way more weight than I have been ever. And I think a lot of it's to do with my technique. A lot of it's to do with the frequency I've been lifting and the mentality of the lifting I've been doing. Something like a squat where like weights like 200, 220, which beforehand might have held some kind of stigma in my head, don't really hold stigma anymore. They're just another training load. So I think a lot is to do like it's mental, it's skill acquisition, it's practice, and there's no need if you were a football player, or you were a darts player, or you were a snooker player, and if you could train, or if you could play snooker or darts or football for 12 hours one day and accumulate 12 hours of practice, and then not be able to practice for the next 6 days because you're so sore from that 12-hour practice. Say a normal practice is 4 hours, let's say, and you practice for, or an appropriate practice length is 4 hours, and you practice for 3 times that amount, so you're absolutely fucked. And you can't manage to get to the pool table, the darts board, or you can't manage to get back to the football pitch for another 6 days. If you had just trained for those typical 4 hours, and you trained for a 5-day week and had the weekend off, you'd accrued 8 hours more practice within that training week. Therefore, in a long training span, you're going to become a much better sports player, or darts player, or footballer, or whatever, because you've accrued a larger body of practice. The practice is probably also going to be a lot higher quality, so you're not going to be fucked. If an appropriate practice amount is 4 hours, and you're practicing for 8-12 hours, every hour of practice past that 4 hour point is going to be compromised quality. And after 8 hours is probably going to be dog shit practice. Lifting is very similar, especially if you're training for strength. You're better off, you look at the volume of lifts you're accruing in the week, and that's how you should look at it. It's not about having a massive squat session on a Monday. Like you do 5 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 10 where you do 100 reps at 60% German volume training, let's say. For strength gain, that's wasted volume. For one, the 60% training load, although it has its place in the training program, is not a high quality load for you. You're not going to get a lot of strength gain out of that. You might get a fairly decent hypertrophy adaptation, but then you're only getting you're only elevating protein synthesis for say 72 hours or whatever the multiple is for 4 days. Backpedal, 96 hours. So like 3-4 days. Let's say it's 4 days. You could have done 2 lesser workouts and elevated protein synthesis for the entire week if you had trained Monday and Thursday. If hypertrophy was your main goal, if strength's your main goal, then you can do 100 reps. Rather than doing 100 reps at 60%, you'd be better off doing 50, 60 reps at like 70 to 80%, because that's going to accrue a much better transfer to like 100% loads. You're going to get a lot stronger doing that kind of training. Also, you can do 6 sessions a week, take more of a Danish kind of approach, and work at the 60 to 75% range, maybe pop in the 80% or 90% here and there during the training cycle, but spend the vast majority of your time between 60 and 80%. That means you approach the bar a lot longer. You probably accrue a much, maybe not much higher volume, but certainly can accrue a higher volume of lifts during the week. And this all adds up in the long run. You're not going to be so sore, not going to be anywhere near sore for workouts. You're much easier to slip into a routine. You'll have much more practice. Weightlifting's the perfect example. There's no point doing like a massive weightlifting session on a Monday to the point like where you can't move Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You're better off practicing little times, like 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, well, however you train, and have a lot more quality in your practice. You do have to lift the 90% plus eventually and spend a lot of time developing that end of it. But especially I think as a beginner or an intermediate, you're better off just accruing that practice, getting more reps. And I can't speak to exactly where the correct percentage is, maybe 80 to 90%. Or 75 to 85% weightlifting. I don't know, weightlifting is not really my strong point. I've done a reasonable amount of it, but I'm not an expert. Like to say, I wouldn't say I was an expert in powerlifting, but certainly, some people might call me an expert in powerlifting. I won't call myself an expert, but certainly that's where a lot more of my expertise lies. And I'd say you'd be better off spending having easier workouts and having more of them throughout the week. It's going to lead to much better strength gain, and you're not going to be sore day in, day out, and it's fine. It's actually it's appropriate not to be sore after your workouts if you're training for strength. If you're training for muscle size, like I said beforehand, you probably want a little bit of muscle soreness, maybe a small to moderate amount of muscle soreness. If you're training for fitness as well, you really don't want to be panning yourself in. You want to be slightly stiff after workout, maybe. But if you're working your cardiovascular system, there's no need to be going into 90% plus for like 20-30 minutes of a 40-minute session. You're just going to get fatigued and get tired, and you dig yourself into a hole. And it's fine to dig yourself into a hole as long as the training and program is appropriate. Like if you do an overload block of 3 weeks, whatever. But as long as you have a plan to come out of that hole you're digging yourself into, because that's what you're doing. Also, when we're talking about that sort of thing, if you're doing a strength program, let's say you're doing an overreaching week, so maybe you normally have 2 heavy sessions in a week. Maybe you do 5 one week and have a much larger volume load. Then you're going to need to take a light week the week after, and it's going to take 3 weeks for you to kind of get. So if week 1 is the overload week, by week 3 or week 4 of the program, you're going to realize the kind of bounce off that. But you're going to have to appreciate you're going to dig yourself in the hole for a little while, and it's only appropriate to do that as long as it's planned within the training cycle. If you train like that all the time, you're blunting your strength response really, mainly. But you're also you're vastly increasing your risk of injury, and you're just going to be fatigued and whatnot. I'm going to leave it there because I'm probably just starting to repeat myself now. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Like, subscribe, all that bollocks. Give us a little comment below if you want to leave a comment, tell me I'm shit, tell me I'm great, whatever. Or if you want me to, more importantly, if you want me to answer a specific question, or let me hear me waffle about a topic for about 10 minutes, then please leave a comment below. This is Mark signing out. Until next time, have a good one.